Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Newsbrowse News broadcast. U.S. Secretary of War Pete Hegseth announced today that the United States is fully aware of China and Russia's assistance to Iran in the ongoing Middle East conflict. Speaking at a briefing in Washington, Hegseth affirmed that the U.S. will take necessary actions to counter these activities. He also emphasized that the coming days will be a decisive moment for the region. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky had previously accused Russia of providing drones and intelligence to Tehran. Hegseth further cited intelligence indicating that current offensive operations are significantly eroding the morale of the Iranian military, leading to widespread desertion, critical personnel shortages, and frustration among senior leaders. He concluded by mentioning his recent visit to the Middle East on March 28th, where he personally observed military operations against Iran. This news is from Central News Agency. Italy's Defense Minister Guido Crosetto has reportedly denied the U.S. military permission to use the Sigonella base on Sicily for bomber flights headed to the Middle East. The refusal stems from the U.S. military's failure to provide prior notification and obtain authorization for the flights. According to Italy's Corriere della Sera, as reported by Linci Quartabout on Tuesday, March 31st, several U.S. bombers planned to stop at Sigonella without Italian consent, with Italy only being informed after their takeoff. The Italian government considers these missions to be non-routine, requiring specific authorization and proper political and military communication beyond the scope of automatic bilateral agreements. Sigonella is a crucial U.S. air hub in the Mediterranean, where American forces typically operate under existing bilateral or NATO accords. Global News reports that Israel's parliament, the Knesset, has approved a controversial law allowing the death penalty for Palestinians convicted of murdering Israelis. This measure, a long-sought goal of the far-right coalition, passed with a 62-48 vote, with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu voting in person. The law establishes the death penalty by hanging as the default punishment in military courts operating in the West Bank, which exclusively try Palestinians, while it also permits Israeli civilian courts to impose the death penalty for Israeli citizens on similar charges. Legal experts argue the wording effectively limits its application to Palestinian citizens of Israel, excluding Jewish citizens. The legislation is not retroactive and will not apply to militants held from the October 7, 2023 attacks. Critics, including international bodies and human rights groups, have condemned the law as discriminatory, inhumane, and contradictory to international law, warning it lacks a deterrent effect and could complicate future hostage negotiations. Israel has not carried out an execution since Nazi war criminal Adolf Eichmann in 1962. A Russian-flagged oil tanker, the Anatoly Kolodkin, arrived at Cuba's Matanzas port on Tuesday, laden with 730,000 barrels of oil. This marks the first oil tanker delivery to the island in 3 months. The administration of President Donald Trump permitted the vessel to proceed, despite existing U.S. sanctions against the ship and an ongoing energy blockade on Cuba. This decision was described by the White House press secretary as a case-by-case allowance for humanitarian reasons. Energy and Mines Minister Vicente de la O. Levy expressed gratitude to Russia, noting the shipment's importance amidst Cuba's severe economic crisis, which has led to prolonged blackouts and shortages of food and medicine. Cuba, which produces only about 40% of its fuel needs, relies heavily on imports. This delivery is expected to supply enough diesel to cover Cuba's daily demand for about 9 to 10 days. Venezuelan and Mexican oil shipments to Cuba had been halted recently due to U.S. pressure. This news comes from the Canadian press. According to UPI, an Argentine court has temporarily halted key provisions of President Javier Milei's labor reform, marking a significant setback for his economic agenda. The decision, issued by Judge Raúl Horacio Ojeda, followed a legal challenge from the General Confederation of Labor, CGT, the country's largest labor union federation. The judge stated there were serious and significant indications that some parts of the reform might conflict with the Constitution, posing risks to fundamental labor rights and existing working conditions. The precautionary measure suspends 82 of the 218 articles of the Labor Modernization Law until a final ruling on their constitutionality. Provisions affected include dynamic wages, splitting vacation days, labor outsourcing rules aimed at reducing litigation, a bank of hours system, and updates to interest calculations in labor lawsuits. It also halts efforts to unify national severance pay standards, reverting to a system with varied jurisdictional rules. On the collective bargaining side, changes intended to regulate the right to strike, including definitions for essential and key activities to maintain minimum operations, are suspended. This restores the CGT's ability to halt critical services. Milei's administration argues these reforms are vital for economic growth, lower inflation, and attracting investment. The government is expected to appeal the temporary suspension. That's all for this video. Thank you for watching. See you in the next video.